Tonight, Walmart fires a man for smoking marijuana. We'll also be discussing sex offender laws in the state of Georgia and freedom for Iraqi women, plus a whole lot more. All coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
And welcome to a brand new edition of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. As always, it is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
All right, Nick, we've got a lot to get into tonight. We are going to be delving into the topic where we actually say sex offender law is wrong. I know it's a sticky situation. No one wants to get into these topics because it's hard to defend. I mean, if you say sex offender, you're kind of giving them a stamp of evil, right? We will be talking about that. We'll go there. But first, I want to talk about Walmart. Yes, Walmart has fired a man for testing positive for marijuana. Now, I know a lot of you are saying, well, there's tons of businesses would do that. It's normal. Well, yes, that's true. But this man had a prescription for marijuana recommended by his doctor, along with a card and his doctor's statement saying that he needed the marijuana as medicine, which is going into a completely different area. Let's get into the story and then we'll talk about the subject. Despite medical marijuana being legal in Michigan, Walmart has fired a cancer patient and former employee of the year who tested positive for the drug. "I was terminated because I failed a drug test," said ex-Walmart employee Joseph Casey. In June of 2008, Casey was an Associate of the Year at Walmart store in Battle Creek, Michigan, despite suffering from a sinus cancer and an inoperable tumor. "It helps me tremendously," Casey said. "I only use it to stop the pain, to make me feel more comfortable and active as a person." It looked like Casey had been smoking marijuana for about 5 years while he worked at Walmart. Not during store hours, of course, when he went home and tried to rest and recuperate. But it wasn't until last November that he had a workplace injury and sprained his ankle. As with all workman comp injuries at Walmart, he had to undergo a drug test when he got back and tested positive for marijuana, at which point he was fired. "I was told they do not accept or honor my medical marijuana card," Casey said. "I have never come to work under the influence," he added, "and I don't think it's fair because I have a medical condition and I can't work and provide for my family." All right, now, Nick, while I do support the right of Walmart to fire someone for any reason, for no reason, it's a business and they should be able to do what they want, it seems very hypocritical because they're not firing people who are testing positive for, say, morphine or Vicodin or OxyContin if it's prescribed by a doctor.
I mean, yeah, if it's not taking place at work, quite frankly, I don't think it's any of the business's business. I don't understand why.
They're right. I mean, I'm going with you. You own a business.
Oh, yeah.
You worked hard. You can fire someone because their fingernails are the wrong color.
You can fire them because you're in a bad mood.
They looked at you wrong. Exactly. Your business, fire people for whatever reason. But this is hypocritical.
That doesn't mean I agree with you firing people for no reason.
Right.
I don't think it should be illegal for you to fire people for no reason, but it's
poor business practice.
Right. Yeah, not a great business practice, and you're not being a particularly nice person. If you've got somebody who's dying from cancer and they're on prescription painkillers that are, say, opiates, as you were saying, Toby, like Vicodin, they're not going to fire you because you're using Vicodin when you're not at work. If it's not directly affecting your work, I don't really think they're going to care too much if it's prescribed by a doctor, which the marijuana is. In many states, you can get, I think it's 13 states now?
14.
14 states where, and they all have their own standards, but you can get marijuana prescribed by a doctor. Quite frankly, marijuana is, in many ways, not as harmful, certainly not as addictive, and not necessarily as mind-altering as some of the prescription medications out there that are prescribed by doctors. And yet, there is a double standard being applied here in this case because, well, marijuana used to be an illegal drug. And Walmart.
Before that, it was a legal drug, Nick. That's what's so silly about all this.
Well, it sounds like Walmart, or this particular Walmart anyway, is sort of taking the tack that, oh, well, it was illegal at one point, so you must not really be taking it for medicine, because marijuana is not medicine.
He's been taking it for years.
Opium is medicine.
He's been taking it for years, and it hasn't affected his work ethic. He's been showing up for work. In fact, he was Associate of the Year in 2008. So clearly, he's a very good worker. He's been showing up. He says here he was putting in 12 to 14-hour days every single day at work. So clearly it's not affecting his work, but Walmart's coming down on him anyways. Now,
putting in days that long is probably going to contribute to an injury at the workplace a lot more than marijuana use when somebody's not at the workplace.
Yeah, so let him go home, and while you're at it,
if you want to talk about what's
Walmart because they're a
for
bunch
the
of
injury
hypocrites.
taking place.
Right, they're giving away all sorts of mind-altering substances in their pharmacies that are much worse for you, that kill way far more people, anyways.
Drink way too much coffee. That's actually worse for you.
It's some people out there. They just think if it comes in a pill form, it's good for you, and if it's you smoke
it's because it
bad.
seems neat and clean and clinical.
I remember a year or two back, I was making phone calls here in New Hampshire to try to pass a medical marijuana bill that actually went through, but our stupid short man wuss of a governor didn't sign it until I vetoed it. Yes, you're a wuss in a short little pansy. Anyways, when I was calling up to some of the representatives here in New Hampshire, one of them told me, I've got chronic back pain, I can't get off the couch, I just have to lay here and eat my OxyContin. I'm so hard up I can't even get to the legislature to vote. But if I did, I would vote against this medical marijuana bill because it sets a bad influence for my teen. Oh, and sitting on the couch all day and popping OxyContin's probably showing him how to live one's life. But smoking a little pot and actually going out and being able to live your life and be a good dad, now that would be hypocritical and horrible. Some people, Nick, if it comes in a pill, it's okay. Some people are stupid.
I mean, OxyContin, you might as well do heroin.
I know, and he's telling me
it's called hillbilly heroin.
My pain is so bad, and I have to eat so much OxyContin, I can't even get off the couch. But if I did, I would vote no on this bill because it's a bad influence for my teen.
Not to mention all the state reps who voted against it, but then went out to the bar, went back home, and pounded back a few, glasses of scotch.
You take
because
your
scotch
heroin.
isn't a drug.
Right.
Yeah, alcohol's not a drug. It's not like it changes your perception of things at all. But apparently, that's okay.
Bunch of hypocrites out there. Anyways, Nick, we do need to move along. Move into another area where, well, we're probably not going to get quite as much support on this because it's got this red flag in it for a lot of people, and that's sex offender. And we're going to go over to Georgia and say that a certain sex offender law is wrong and needs to come off the books. And people go, well, it's there. It's a sex offender registry. You got to have it to protect the children, Nick. The children. Don't you think of the children. How can you talk about this? Can you? Have I changed your mind? The children, Nick.
No.
Don't bring it up.
All
The
right.
children.
Well, this is specifically talking about how the Georgia Supreme Court has ruled and upheld a provision of the state's sex offender registry law that requires some people who have not committed sex crimes to register on the sex offenders registry. Now, it's important to take note of this because you don't actually have to rape or molest or assault anybody sexually to end up on the sex offender registry, at least not in Georgia. The law, said to be one of the toughest in the nation, allows the state to keep a tight leash on child molesters, rapists, and other sexual predators after they have served their prison time, but it also requires anyone convicted of kidnapping or false imprisonment of a minor to register as a sex offender, regardless of whether a sexual act was committed or not. The challenge was brought by Jake Rainier, who committed a drug robbery, obviously not a good guy, not a sex offender either, at least based on this case, in Gwinnett County in May 2000. Rainier and his co-defendants picked up a 17-year-old girl who was going to sell them some marijuana. My guess is I don't know how old he was, but he probably wasn't too much older. Instead of making a deal, they drove her to a cul-de-sac, took the pot, and abandoned her. That's false imprisonment.
That's less than the
wrongful
police
imprisonment.
would have done, though. The police would have
They would
imprisoned her and taken her marijuana and then slapped a record on her, probably sent her to jail. So in a sense, Nick, this man did much less than the police would have done and faced no charges whatsoever. So, and he's a sex offender now because he stole marijuana from a 17-year-old. Yeah,
And actually, it doesn't mention how old he was at the time. He may have actually been a minor himself. Because the way the law is written, apparently, if you kidnap or wrongfully imprison a minor, you're a sex offender. Well, if you're a minor when you commit the offense, I'm not sure that there's actually an exception.
Well,
so he
it's
could have
kinda
been
like-
16.
We've talked about
and-
story after story where two 16-year-olds or two 15-year-olds will go at it, and they're both sex offenders. They'll send each other these sexy photos, and they're in possession and creation of child porn. Slap a sex offender on their forehead, and they're forever
They're
screwed.
not going to consider the age of the offender.
I mean, people are taking leaks behind trees and being arrested as a sex offense, which really
Public
means
urination is a sex offense in
your
many places.
entire registry out there, this thing that you view as all holy that's going to protect the children, is worthless. Because you're throwing drunks who are just pissing behind a tree on it. You're throwing minors who are having sex with each other. Perfectly normal thing to do. I don't know where you're coming from out there, but I remember when I was a kid, perfectly normal thing for two minors to do together is have, you know, what minors do together.
Right.
But now you're going to call them sex offenders in this world. What the hell is wrong with you? You're telling me you were all repressed when you were 15 years old and didn't go have sex with other 15-year-olds? I'm not saying that it's a good idea.
It's probably not a good idea, but yeah, most people before the time.
But you're telling me you
age of
didn't do that?
majority-
Would your life have been better off if you had been busted and someone called the police on you and you had a good old
I wanted to point
label for the rest of your
I want
life?
to point this out. The argument that the court has made here, it was a 5-2 majority making this decision. The argument that the Supreme Court of Georgia is making is that it's not actually punitive to put somebody on a sex offender registry, Toby.
No.
The argument, writing,
Nick, you can't live within 1,000 feet of anything. A daycare
All right.
center, a school.
But that's not punishment.
That is punishment.
Justice Harold Melton, writing for the majority, doesn't think so. Justice Harold Melton rejected arguments that the provision, as applied to Rainier, was cruel and unusual punishment. Sex offender registry laws, Melton wrote, are regulatory, not punitive in nature. Because the registration requirements themselves do not constitute punishment, it is of no consequence whether or not one has committed an offense that is sexual in nature before being required to register.
It does not matter. It is not consequence
doesn't matter if
that
you
one
committed a sex
commits a
offense.
sex offense to get on a sex registry
So
list.
they can put anybody on it.
Why
is
don't
what
we
he's
just
saying.
put
It's
any
administrative.
bad,
It's not punitive.
anything you want to label someone as bad? So murderers should be put on it. Any burglars,
Any offense,
any
misdemeanor crime.
anything. Man.
Why not?
But then again, like I said, I think I went off on a tangent. It really does take away the whole purpose of having a sex offender
the
registry.
broadening the
Because if you're,
registry and-
I mean, you're just putting
Well-
it's kind of like having, we have over 1 million people on the terror watch list,
Well,
which
and
makes it worthless.
And quite frankly, if you're letting people out of prison who have committed sex offenses, whether they molested a child or they raped somebody, and you're saying, well, we can't expect them to live by the same standards as everybody else. They haven't been rehabilitated to the same level of everybody else. Well, why are you letting them out of prison?
Give
if
them
that's
the
really
option.
the argument, no, don't let them out.
Give
if
them
you
the
think that
option,
they're a threat-
castration or life in jail.
if you want to go that extreme, if you're saying you don't want them to be a threat to other people, then why are you letting them out back on the street? And this, what I
How
don't
many
like
sex
is this,
offenders are sitting there like,
this
you know,
halfway point.
I would go and rape another child, but it's 1,000 feet to that school, and I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah,
Really?
because then I'd be violating the provisions of the sex offender
like-
registry law. But I don't care about raping children
I'm
or
too-
raping other people.
I'm too lazy to walk 1,000 feet. This is what's going through the people's heads who are writing these laws, and then you, the people, are eating it up.
It's
just
not like
so-
sex offenders
it
don't
makes-
reoffend just because they're on this registry.
Right, it makes people, actually, I think it does a negative thing, because then parents are sitting there thinking, well, the government's protecting us from sex offenders, they set up these sex offender registries, and then parents don't do their job and watch out for their kids.
Just because you're within 1,000 feet of a school
Doesn't mean you're safe.
Right, it doesn't mean there's
No.
not sex offenders walking
So
around.
this is probably doing a disservice
Right.
to most parents
The laws-
because they're not watching out, doing their jobs as parents and watching out for all the creeps out there. Guess what, parents? There's a lot of creeps out in the world.
Well-
and the good sex offenders haven't been caught. Okay, they're not all bad, but the ones who, the real, like, there's a lot of sex offenders out there who have not been caught, Nick.
Well,
They're still out there.
to
They're
be
not on
fair-
the registry.
To be fair, the concern about strangers, especially if you're a parent, about strangers molesting your children or doing something bad to your children, it's actually not that well founded.
95% happens from people you know.
People you know, quite often relatives. A lot of times it's not immediate family, but oftentimes it's an uncle, a cousin. It's not a pleasant subject to talk about, but the fact of the matter is if you want to keep your children safe and you want to try to keep them safe from sex offenders, then when you're looking for warning signs that your kid might be getting molested, well, you better be looking for that when they're around relatives and friends of the family, because
Watch out for Uncle Bill.
9 times out of 10 or 8
creep in
times
the
out of
corner.
10, that's who's going to be doing it. Not some stranger on a
The
playground.
thing
That's
is
usually not what it is.
So many people shy away from this subject, and so many people out there think that we're creeps for even bringing it up. But it's important to talk about because it's really affecting a lot of people out there. It's ruining innocent people's lives, and it's giving a false sense of security and making bad parents out there.
Yeah, I mean, I understand you're not going to feel too much sympathy for a rapist on the sex offender registry. But it's not just rapists and child molesters on the sex offender registry. As you mentioned, it's people who've been charged with public urination. It's people who've been charged with wrongful imprisonment of a minor, even if, I'm not sure, but I would imagine even if they're a minor, at the same time that they committed the offense. So it's a very broad registry in many places. Different states obviously have different rules.
We should have an everything registry. I mean, there should be a drug dealer registry. There should be an assaultive registry. There should be a battery registry.
Well, be careful because a lot of bureaucrats are working on all of those things.
Register everybody. We should just have a registry where everyone's put into it. Anyways, it's time to move on, Nick. If you have a different opinion on this, though, we'd love to hear it. I'm sure we've upset a lot of people out there, especially the children.
I don't know why you would want to put people who haven't committed a sex crime on the sex offender registry. It seems to defeat the point. Seems like you need a different registry if that's what you want to do.
Waters it all down. If you have a different opinion, fmtv@freemindsmedia.org is the email. And of course, freemindsmedia.org is the web address. If you don't know how to log into your email, don't worry. We've set up an easy way for you to contact us right from freemindsmedia.org. Just click on the contact button. All right, when we come back, Nick, we are going to be moving on, talking about a police lawsuit, or a lawsuit against police, coming out of New Orleans, and a whole lot more. Stay tuned. This is Free Minds TV.
This is Glenn Jacobs, and you're watching Free Minds TV.
And welcome back to the show. It is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
And I forgot, this is the time where we talk about giving us money. Donate, donate, donate. Enough said. If you haven't donated yet, it's time to donate. Who else are you going to hear who's brave enough to come on television week after week and talk about these unpopular issues, Nick?
If you have donated, thank you.
I get accosted in the grocery store because of this show, Nick. By some friendlies and some angries.
Yeah, and some people like the show and some people don't.
And I deserve $1 for that. So if you haven't done it yet, donate.
The ones who don't never talk to me. They always accost you. I've never had anybody come up to me and argue with me.
Maybe it's because you're short.
I don't know.
That wouldn't make sense, would it? Anyways, if you have donated to the show, we really appreciate it. You are the reason we are still on the air. If it wasn't for the people who have helped out over the years now, we would not be on the air, and especially the ones who have helped out recently. Thank you, thank you, and thank you. And if you're the dirtbag watching this for free and you actually enjoy it,
we do put it out there for free.
Thank you.
We do put it out there for free.
But still, I
we don't want people not to watch the show just because they don't want to pay for it.
What's the opposite of thank? Is there an... I'm going to go with
I don't know. I can't think of it.
Thank you. Anyways, moving right along after that very excellent plug there. It's a little desperate, wasn't it? Anyways, moving right along. A federal jury is hearing testimony about allegations that New Orleans police officers have engaged in a pattern of unlawful arresting or harassing of journalists and bystanders who tape or photograph them in public. Now, yes, this story is coming out of New Orleans, but you know, it's really happening all over the United States and all over the world. Police officers, for the most part, and this isn't a complete blanket statement, but it seems an awful lot of police officers don't like having their pictures taken. They will put up surveillance equipment to monitor all of us citizens, but when it comes to people trying to videotape the police officers doing their job, well, they get real upset. Some say it's because of terrorism, because terrorists would videotape police officers doing their jobs. Some say, well, they don't like it, shut that camera off, and don't have a reason. But the point is, not a lot of them like it. Now, that being said, there are a lot of them that are very friendly to it, especially here in New Hampshire where we're broadcasting from. There have been a number of police officers who are very camera friendly. That being said, there have also been a number of New Hampshire officers that have been the opposite. But like I said, this is coming from New Orleans, so I'll continue the article. 7 jurors heard testimony and opening statements on Monday in a trial for a lawsuit backed by the American Civil Liberties Union that claims that police officers violated the constitutional rights of plaintiff Greg Griffith and Noah Leonard, who were arrested in 2007 on a carnival parade. The lawsuit cites 11 other incidences since 2005 in which people were arrested or allegedly threatened while videotaping, photographing, or merely observing police officers. And don't think there's only been 11 cases, to be honest, Nick. That's only the ones being cited. There have probably been 10s, 20s, 30s, hundreds, thousands across the United States, at least.
Yeah, and I have a problem with this because police officers, they're public servants, supposedly. They work for the taxpayer. Everybody, including me, who pays taxes, if you're a police officer watching this, we're the ones who cut your paycheck. We work all day, and then the government rips the money out of our paycheck or taxes us on our house, and it's handed over to the police department to mostly cut pay and benefits to police officers. So if we want to tape you, we the people want to tape you while you're doing your job for us, because that's who you work for. We don't work for you. Well, we do, but we're really not supposed to. You're supposed to work for us. You're supposed to be providing us with a service. And we're going to tape you while you do it if we feel like it.
Especially, Nick, if it's in public, because I hear the argument already, well, what about teachers, Nick? You think that any member of the public should be able to waltz into a school and set up shop with a video camera?
A school is a closed facility.
Right, and we're talking about police officers in public, on a public road, in
if it's
public
a public
park.
place, a school's not open to the public.
Right.
I can't just walk into a high school.
So we're not talking about trying to bust into the back part of the police department and into the holding cells and into the sergeant's office, et cetera,
But if you're walking down the street, if you're making a traffic stop on a public way, that's public property where anybody can be, there's no privacy there.
No.
You're in public. They wouldn't rule that a private person really has a right to privacy. The police tape us. They don't bust into our homes with cameras. There are protections in place for that. I'm not saying we should be able to bust into police officers' homes with cameras.
No.
Tape them on their own time.
No.
But when they're discharging their duties in public, where they're videotaping me, the police videotape you when they pull you over for a routine traffic stop. Most cars now have that dash cam in the cruiser. They're videotaping you because it's a public event. They're discharging their duty. So it's okay for them to have a copy of the tape, but not for you. What's the real concern here?
Why do they care? That is the
Well,
point.
some people don't like being on camera. They just don't like being on camera. Another thing is, some officers might not be doing everything by the book, and they don't want a defendant or anybody else to have a record of them either not processing an arrest correctly or violating a traffic law when the police officer parks somewhere that they shouldn't park. We've done some stories on that coming out of Boston where they like
all
to
over
park
the place,
in the handicap spaces and all over the place. Not because they're in the middle of actually effecting an arrest. They're just going to get donuts or coffee or something, and I'll just park in the handicap space because I'm a cop, and they're not going to write me a ticket.
What are you going to do about it, citizen?
We can tape you, and then we have proof.
Yeah, but in some
And
places
you wouldn't
can't
like
tape.
that.
It's so ridiculous. In some places, Nick, you can actually be arrested for taping on your own property. I mean, here in New Hampshire has a wiretapping law, and it's like this in many other states.
Wiretapping law, but
that states that if you're videotaping a police officer on your own private property in your own house.
Well, specifically, the
They can
New
still
Hampshire
arrest
statute makes reference. It's the audio recording that's the issue. If you can record somebody just with a picture and with no audio, then you're not subject to the wiretapping statutes. But it's really not as useful if you actually want to show what's going on.
Right. So why would one create such a law, Nick? It just seems like it's the cards.
Well,
are
it
stacked
seems like
against
if
us
police, for the good police officers out there, if you are doing your job
We should
by
see
the
it.
book, you're not violating the law, you're not violating people's rights to due process, then all that person is doing is collecting more evidence for you to use.
And you know what?
If you're trying to
Yeah.
effect an arrest and somebody takes a swing at you, then it's documented that yes, that person took a swing at you. But if you're not doing your job by the book, you're not you're not reading people their Miranda rights or whatever, then I can see why some police officers wouldn't like it. But
That
I think
being
the
said,
honest
Nick,
ones really shouldn't have too much of a problem with it.
And that being said, I
They might
do
just
want
not
to
like being
thank
on
the honest
camera.
ones out there. There are
Yeah.
a lot of honest police officers out there who don't mind being videotaped, who actually even
I really
have
don't
thanked
see why it should be
people.
an issue.
So thanks to them. I know that we were ripping and looked like a blanket statement some of the time, but I know there are a number of good police officers out there as well who get into it to actually do the right thing, to protect people's rights and protect citizens. Unfortunately, though, they're given bad orders sometimes. But
Bad orders, and I think there is, I think especially vice crimes like the war on
Bad
drugs.
orders.
Well, bad orders that lead to corruption.
Right.
And
It's
I
true.
think there is a lot
All right.
of corruption because of the vice crimes.
And we could talk about that for quite a while longer, but first I do want to get into this last story you got, Nick, about Iraq. We've been there for many, many years now. It's the endless war. The endless, endless war. Wait, didn't we pull out? Didn't that say what
Well,
Barack Obama was going to say?
Well, you could argue that it's been going on since like 1990, 1991.
We sort of pulled out.
We sort of pulled out, but then we were still flying.
Still got the girl
patrols in
pregnant.
Fly zone. Jesus Christ. All right, let's get into the article.
Get to his shot.
Let's get into my highbrow stuff. Don't pay attention to him over there. Now, this is an article coming from Middle East Online, and it's making a case. I don't know if I'm going to agree with it 100%, but I think there's some good points here. It's talking about the amount of freedom that women in Iraq have today as compared to when Saddam Hussein was in power. Now, I'm not going to defend Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein dying was, or at least being deposed, was probably one of the good things to come out of the U.S. invading Iraq again. But for women in Iraq, the regime change, the switch to this new democratic Iraq, doesn't mean that women are actually more free. On the contrary, Saddam Hussein's regime was awful, but it was secular. Today you have a supposedly democratic Iraq, but you have a lot of different religious factions. Iraq has been set up more as a theocracy this time. Even with the US government in place, Article 2 of the new Iraqi constitution says Islam is the official religion of the state and is a basic source of legislation. Subhead A says no law can be passed that contradicts the undisputed rules of Islam. So there's a democratic process in place in Iraq, but it is in fact a theocratic Islamic state. It was not under Saddam Hussein. In fact, under Saddam Hussein's government, women had a full year's maternity leave, now cut to 6 months. Women had much greater freedom of movement, safety. They were protected from religious radicals. Believe it or not, when you have one bad strongman in place, a lot of times, well, he cracks down on all the little strongmen because he doesn't like the competition. So if you're a woman in Iraq, beforehand, the clerics, the religious radicals who want to repress women and make Iraqi society more like, say, Afghan society as it stands today, well, they were held in check because Saddam Hussein would kill you. He would just straight up kill you.
Yeah, he wasn't a very nice guy.
No, he wasn't a very nice guy, but these guys aren't nice either, so I don't really have a problem when he tortures and kills the clerics. Somebody's got to torture and kill him. But
just kill him.
yeah, you don't. But the torturing part's a bit much. But they're not nice people. So I'm just pointing out here that for women in Iraq, there's a lot of anecdotes here that I'm not sure we're really going to have time to get into. It does point out that there is 25% representation for women in parliament. So 25% of the representatives in Iraqi parliament, they're women. But as one commentator here, who's an Iraqi woman, points out, these women from party lists stand up to defend their party in the parliament, not for women's rights. So just because you have women in the parliament doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be standing up for
It's so similar to what we have here in the United States. Just because we have conservatives in the people who call themselves conservatives doesn't mean they vote in a conservative manner.
And let me put it this way. I mean, there's a lot of white people in Congress. Does that mean that they always vote on laws that are in the interest of white people? No. There's a lot of black people in Congress. Does that mean they always are protecting other black people? No. They'll vote for legislation that's harmful to a whole lot of other black people.
One more reason our foreign policy rocks, Nick. Go USA! Helping out those women over in Iraq. That was the point, right?
Yeah, supposedly one of the goals.
We did good.
We didn't do good at all.
What? What article was that?
Maybe one day.
Yeah.
But not as it stands today.
Bummer. Maybe next time. Don't worry, Nick. We've got many more years to fight this war.
We installed a religious government.
We can fight it for years to come. We're out of time. We're over time. In fact, once again, it's been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Have a good one.